John Ton was gravely ill, and the doctor announced he had only 3 months left to live. I didn't want to believe it, so I studied medicine myself, hoping for a miracle. I scaled cliffs to gather rare herbs for him and knelt down, kowtowing frantically to a famous doctor, hoping to be accepted as a disciple. But after 3 months, John and his friends mocked me together, saying, "As expected, a fool who couldn't see through such poor acting." So I broke up with him. A few days after the breakup, he was truly diagnosed with a terminal illness. He lay in bed day and night, refusing to eat or drink, only hoping to see me one last time. I journeyed non-stop from a plateau 5,000 meters above sea level, hoping to return as soon as possible and use these precious herbs to cure John's stubborn illness. Without a moment's rest, I took a plane and then a train, staying up all night, and finally arrived home at 3 in the morning the next day. But the house was brightly lit, with no sign of anyone wanting to sleep. My heart tightened. John's old illness must have relapsed, and he couldn't sleep again. This time, even sleeping pills probably wouldn't work, and he could only endure until dawn. Whenever he couldn't sleep, he was in the most pain, with every nerve in his body tense. I rushed to the hospital to get some painkillers for him through the emergency channel. Because of his illness, I had become fluent in administering painkillers and alleviating his pain. The doctor's incessant words echoed in my mind. "He can hold on for at most 3 months. If there's anything unfinished, hurry up and do it." My eyes stung and tears welled up. I clutched the straps of my backpack. Fortunately, it contained the herbs I'd picked from the cliffs. He must get better soon. There are so many things I still want to do with him. We haven't raised kittens and puppies together, haven't traveled together, haven't gotten married. But opening the door, I was greeted by scattered takeout boxes and a sofa full of people, making it look more like a bar. This house had excellent soundproofing. I chose it because I was worried that John, often coughing due to his poor health, would disturb the neighbors. But now, he was throwing a party at home. Indeed, it's fun to fool a fool. I've been acting for so long and she didn't notice. If you get a chance, you should try it too. It's quite unique, John said unabashedly, treating me like a toy. If I hadn't come back early today, I wouldn't have known how long he planned to deceive me. How does she taste? John is the real player. John is invincible. My vision went black and my legs felt weak. I didn't curse, cry, or throw a tantrum at him. I gently closed the door. Before he said those words, I was still defending him, thinking he just wanted to relax after being too stifled. After all, when I was at home before, he was careful even with his coughing, afraid to bother me. Now, finally having a chance, of course, he wanted to let loose, but I never thought his illness was fake, just to make a fool of me. The herbs in my backpack, the scars on my thighs, all seemed like a joke. I truly believed John was different from others, that he genuinely liked me. But now, it seems he was no different, enjoying making fun of me, enjoying watching me as a joke. These were things I didn't know. As a child, others thought I was slow and called me a fool, and no one wanted to play with me. Only John patiently played with me. I followed him year after year, letting him see my feelings. He had many admirers, always more than just me, until one day he got seriously ill. Everyone else left him, but I held onto his hand, just like he did for me when we were kids. I often felt fortunate, believing it was fate. A perfectly healthy person suddenly fell ill and just happened to accept my confession. If possible, I would rather spend my life alone in exchange for his safety, even if we are two parallel lines that never intersect. The reason he suddenly fell ill and accepted my confession was because he orchestrated it all himself. There are no such coincidences. It was all deliberate. Someone was the first to speak. Sister-in-law! Sister-in-law! John's previously relaxed posture instantly became upright, and everything he had done vanished in an instant. The others, seeing the situation clearly, quickly made their escape. After they left, I put down my backpack and decisively broke up with him. He didn't even try to argue, just said one word. Okay. I was puzzled. John is a top young master in City B. How could a mere ailment be incurable? But now I know it's not that he didn't want to treat it. He wasn't even sick. The room fell into a deathly silence. John was the first to speak. What happened to you? Why are you bleeding?" His voice trembled slightly, his brows knitted in anxiety. I calmly looked at my feet. The wound probably reopened, but it's just some blood. It's not deadly. Yet John looked extremely worried. "It's none of your business." Before I could finish, he scooped me up and rushed me to the hospital. The flesh on the left side of my thigh was mangled, wrapped tightly with gauze, but there were still some small stones and gravel that hadn't been cleaned out, making the whole thigh hard to look at. "Miss, your wound has started to fester and swell due to the weather. We need to disinfect it now. It might hurt a bit. Please bear with it." John's eyes reddened as he questioned what had happened. Didn't he know best? Wasn't he the one who was sick? But I wanted to bring him back to life. The last thing I wanted was to see him die. My mother left me. My father also left me to live alone in this world. Finally, I found someone I loved. And now he wanted to leave me too. So, I saw online that there was a rare herb growing on a cliffside. And it was said that if you could pick it and use it as medicine, any difficult illness could be cured. Even though the credibility of this rumor was low, I wanted to try. As long as there was a chance. What if it worked? The Highlands had thin air, rarely visited by people, muddy roads, and unpredictable weather. One wrong step could cost your life. Wasn't this wound the best proof of my love for him? Since childhood, others have mocked me as a fool. So is loving John wholeheartedly my innate talent? That herb was delicate and only grew in crevices. It took all my strength to pull it out, but the sudden exertion caused me to fall backward uncontrollably. My thigh was scraped along the rocks, rolling back and forth several times before stopping. My left thigh took the most impact and was the most severely injured. Fortunately, the heavens spared my life, letting me survive. I didn't have time to think too much. I just did a simple bandage and rushed back. Compared to my life, John was more important. It's because of him that I am who I am today. If it weren't for him holding my hand resolutely back then, how could I have survived until now? So I must persevere. I must rush back home to our home. What if he's afraid of the dark alone at home? What if he's too lonely alone? What if he can't sleep alone? What then? I gritted my teeth, enduring this pain. It was truly painful. The moment the alcohol was sprayed, it felt like 1,000 arrows piercing my chest. Worse than death, the pain turned my face pale, drenched me in sweat. John shouted at the nurse, "Go call your doctor to administer anesthesia. Do you want people to suffer?" His tone was contemptuous and arrogant. "This is my own choice. What does it have to do with you, Mr. Tan? Who are you to me?" He was silent. After all, we had just broken up. "I am your friend. But I don't acknowledge him as a friend." "Sorry, I don't have such a cold-blooded friend." After the procedure, an hour had passed, and I was in so much pain that I nearly fainted. To prevent further necrosis of the thigh tissue, the hospital strongly recommended that I be hospitalized. John busily handled the admission procedures for me. Honestly, if he were my boyfriend at that moment, I would have been moved to tears and silently swore in my heart that I would marry no one but him in the future. "Leave. I don't want to see you. And don't feel guilty, it was my own foolishness to love you. It has nothing to do with you." John really put down what he was holding and walked out of the ward. He was still the same as before, doing whatever I told him to do. He coldly and unfeelingly walked out of the ward without looking back. I stumbled after him, leaning against the door, watching him leave. I silently prayed in my heart, hoping he would come back and give me a good explanation. As long as he spoke, even if he lied, I could believe it. But he impatiently kicked the trash can. "I don't care for taking care of you. You really think you're something, huh? Acting as the leading lady in her own play? I thought he genuinely felt guilty about my love. But it was all just for his own pride. He wanted to leave a long time ago, but it was too late to say so. If I had known earlier, he wouldn't have had to play this one-man show with me. It's my fault for selfishly wanting to keep him by my side. I didn't mention how I got injured, just made up a random excuse saying I had a careless fall on the road. But he didn't realize that my clumsy lie had deceived him. After all, he never took my words to heart. To him, I was never particularly important. Maybe during idle moments, he would bring up my stories to mock me with his friends. calling me a complete simp. Fortunately, my body wasn't in serious trouble, just requiring daily hospital visits for dressing changes. After returning home, I stared blankly at the prepackaged herbs in the fridge. Brewing herbal medicine is a meticulous task, requiring precise proportions of herbs and water. In this scorching summer, I had to sit by the stove, watching over the pot. One must be fully attentive and focused, otherwise, the water would dry out in an instant. Every week, I brewed medicine for him. He always said it was bitter, so I tried different ways to coax him into taking it, praying that the illness would no longer torment him. If I could, I would bear this pain for him. Otherwise, why would he say the medicine is bitter? A terminally ill person with only 3 months left wouldn't have such a sensitive taste. Otherwise, why would he say he didn't like drinking it? A healthy person wouldn't like taking medicine. He accompanied me in this act, and it was hard on him. Now that he's cured and gone, these herbs are useless, so I threw them away, along with my love for him. It's ridiculous that after sharing a bed with him for so many years, I didn't realize he was faking his illness. His midnight coughing was a preset alarm, a deliberate act. He even calculated it precisely, so I would hear his coughing in my dreams, day after day, year after year. Why did he do all this? Was it worth it to deceive me? I prayed for him day and night, searched for renowned doctors, traveled to the ends of the earth. As long as I lived, I would keep hope alive. My heart turned cold. If I had known this was the outcome, I might as well have died with my parents on that cold winter night. At least I wouldn't be lonely. The door was knocked. I opened it to see John reeking of alcohol and heartlessly shut the door. "My home doesn't welcome you." But he ignored my words, drunkenly mumbling something unintelligible. I could barely make out a few words. He wanted the medicine. He felt unwell. Still wanting the medicine? Isn't he already cured? What's he playing at now? Maybe being drunk was just another act. I threw a basin of ice water on his face, waking him up a bit. He trembled, holding my hands. "Linda, I realized I can't live without you. If I don't drink that medicine for a day, I feel miserable." I pushed him away. His discomfort was none of my concern. I wasn't a doctor. Looking back, it's quite funny. I lived my days as if they had 48 hours instead of 24, working during the day and auditing medical classes at night. I bought a pile of books to study at home, often reading them when I couldn't sleep. I searched for cases similar to John's, but even after the books were worn from use, I found nothing. Worried that I lacked skill, I sought out a renowned master to take me as an apprentice. But since I was not in the right field and lacked extensive medical knowledge, no one was willing to accept me. Fortunately, I managed to obtain a certification, which barely proved I had some knowledge. Whenever I had time, I would kneel in his yard, not for fame or fortune, but just to have him take me as a student to cure John's illness. This was my only wish in life. Dr. Wong, exasperated, came out and poured dirty dishwater over my head, scolding me to leave immediately. I abandoned my pride, clutching his pants and begging him to take me as a student. I kowtowed repeatedly, each knock of my head heavy and resonant, striking the hearts of those who saw. My head was soon bloodied, my brain feeling shaken. Finally, Dr. Wong agreed to take me as an apprentice, but only on the condition that once John was cured, I would leave. I nodded in agreement. All I wanted was for John to be healthy. Under his guidance, I made rapid progress, even learning pulse diagnosis and acupuncture. Sometimes when the clinic was busy, I could lend a hand. I thought John was genuinely too weak, believing he had only 3 months left to live, yet I couldn't diagnose his illness. I spent countless efforts trying to treat his illness, only to find it was all in vain. What was it all for? It was for him? For our future? Memories surged back, stabbing me with pain once more. John, pale, collapsed in my arms, weakly calling my name. Seeing his complexion worsen, I rushed him to the hospital. The results came back quickly. He had acute lung cancer, requiring extensive surgery, with only about 3 months to live. I couldn't help but laugh coldly. John, in an attempt to win me back, had convinced the doctor to act with him. His performance had escalated dramatically. Wasn't it 3 months before? And he was still fine now. John, can you stop with these little tricks? I'm not you. I don't have time to play along. Thank you for enduring this act with me before. Name your price. I'll sell everything to pay you back. Director Tan, don't go to such lengths next time." Thinking he was lying, I went home. 5 days later, I heard about John again. His friend called, stammering, "Sis, Brother John is in the hospital. He wants to see you one last time. He doesn't have more than 2 months left." 2 months again, when just days ago the doctor said 3 months. I didn't believe it and hung up. Then a video came through. John lying in bed, tubes everywhere, the sheets stained red, blood at the corners of his mouth. It seemed he wasn't pretending this time. I retrieved the discarded herbs from the fridge and rushed over. Could he really be ill? Well, I'd treat it as a final visit. John, upon seeing me, gave a tired but happy smile, unable to stop coughing, his lungs seemingly about to burst. Yet he restrained himself, looking at me helplessly. Apologetically, he said, "I'm sorry, Linda. I initially meant to deceive you. I loudly claimed I was ill, and everyone avoided me, calling me a sickly person. But then I realized that you were the only one who truly cared for me. It was my fault in the past. My days are numbered. Will you accompany me through the last leg of this journey?" John pleaded with me, afraid I would reject him. This is John's karma. He deserves this. It's his just deserts. "All right, beg me." As soon as the words left my mouth, John dropped to his knees with a thud, his eyes bloodshot. "Linda, I'm begging you. You're the only one I have left. If you leave too, I don't know how I'll go on." "Not acting as well as before, Brother John?" I mockingly laughed at him, seeing him as nothing more than a despicable suitor. We had so many chances to express our true feelings to each other, to speak from the heart, but he chose to make jokes, only thinking of how to laugh at me. If only he had known then. I turned to leave, saying I had no time, but he held me tightly. Although he was seriously ill, he was still a grown man with the strength to overpower a woman. I was trapped in his arms, unable to move. Mrs. Tan rushed in. "Linda, I heard about you and my son. Don't worry, I will support you too. You just need to choose an auspicious day and hold the wedding. During this time, I need to trouble you to stay with my son. As a mother, I don't have many big wishes. I just wanted to see him live a smooth and peaceful life. But life is unpredictable, and I didn't expect things to come to this point. His greatest wish now is to marry you in his final days." She spoke with a tearful concern. I hadn't even agreed yet, and they had already put me in a difficult position. John spoke to me earnestly. "Linda, please, believe me this time, okay? I will show you my true heart. I won't be like I was before. I was immature then, but I've changed. I will treat you well." Right now, John only disgusted me. To get me, he came up with this plan. He knew I was soft-hearted, unable to refuse people, and he used that against me. He didn't realize that his heartfelt appearance was just like when he deceived me. Even if he truly loved me, it didn't matter. Love can be faked. Falsehood is truth, and truth is falsehood. Even he himself can no longer distinguish between the real and the fake. 3 months, right? Hold a wedding, right? Then I'll agree. Seeing me agree, John smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. He hugged me and spun around in the hospital room. People outside the door looked in with envious eyes. They thought illness and the threat of death hadn't separated us, not knowing this was just another act I was playing with him. In 3 months, we would go our separate ways. He would go to his hell, and I would live my life. Since agreeing to the wedding, he took me to bridal shops every day to try on dresses. He even hired a foreign designer to tailor a wedding dress for me, but I found it bothersome. I didn't care at all. I didn't love him anymore. My heart was unmoved, just wanting to get it over with and move on with my life. Before, I would have been thrilled for hours over a soda can tab he picked up and put on my finger. But now, wearing a gorgeous wedding dress, standing next to the man I supposedly loved, I had only one thought in my mind: to escape. Marrying someone I didn't love was killing me. I tested John. What if you don't make it to 3 months and I become a widow? He thought I was concerned for him. And with a choking laugh, he said, "Then we can move the date up. It's better to do it sooner so we don't have to worry about it." That would be perfect. After all, I've never seen a grand wedding turn into a funeral. I eagerly looked forward to that day. Every time we went to the hotel for a rehearsal, I always found an excuse to send John away, saying I was worried about his health. Hearing this, John was overjoyed and willing to do whatever I said. The wedding venue was elegant and simple, with some plaques to be delivered on the day. The rest would be a surprise for him. The wedding day flew by in the blink of an eye. I wore another simple wedding dress, and John looked at me with displeasure, asking why I wasn't wearing the one we chose. I'm worried that if something happens during the wedding, I can immediately drop everything to take care of you. John fell silent and apologized for his earlier behavior, thinking I didn't want to marry him. But in reality, I was just worried about him. He was truly gravely ill, learning to deceive himself. The guests at the wedding were all wealthy or influential, known within the social circle. The Tan family had even invited the media to cover the event, making sure everyone knew John was getting married and to place me on a moral high ground, trapping me in their grasp. Everything had been planned in advance. What sincerity? What true love? What regrets? It was all fake. He didn't really love me. I was just a pawn to him. Useless, but hard to throw away. Midway through the wedding, it was my turn to speak. I lifted my dress to reveal the scarred marks on my thigh, questioning John about them. He said it was from a fall. John, you really are sick. Do you know how I got these? I was worried about you having little time left, so I went alone to the Highlands to pick herbs for you and fell. Do you understand now? Why are there stones and gravel? Was it really just a simple fall? I thought I could use these herbs to cure your illness, but you were pretending. How can I treat something fake? When John was healthy, he loved hiking, exploring remote highlands. He knew how difficult those paths were and how unlikely it was for a girl to survive. I thought the hardest path was the one to the highlands, but in reality, the hardest path was the one of true love. People imagine this path full of flowers, but it's one full of scars that don't stop hurting. You asked why I suddenly cut my bangs. I told you it was because I wanted a change of style. I lifted my bangs, showing the stitched scars on my forehead. This is from my arrogance, thinking I could be a goddess of love, begging others to accept me as a student to cure you. Stitch after stitch, I really thought I was a fool who fell for your lies time and time again, yet was still willing to believe you unconditionally. Yes, now I'm finally willing to admit that I'm a fool. Before, when others called me a fool, I tried to explain, but now I see I truly am a complete fool. I had never felt such hatred. The overwhelming emotions were engulfing me. I hated the injustice of the world, hated that John was never sincere, hated my own weakness and helplessness, and more so, hated watching all this and being unable to do anything. I took off the wedding dress, revealing my casual sportswear. I clapped my hands, and the once festive wedding decorations transformed into a funeral setup. Everyone in the hotel was stunned. John looked at me in disbelief. What are you doing? Today is our wedding day. Can't we talk about this at home? I know I was wrong before, but I'll change. Please believe me, okay? John begged humbly, but it was too late. Too late. The plaques and wreaths were brought in, and the cheerful music switched to a somber melody. Mrs. Tan spoke coldly, gritting her teeth with fire in her eyes. What's wrong with my son? He barely has any time left and still wants to marry you. You are a wicked person with the heart of a viper. He's not even getting treatment just to marry you first. John stood between us. Mom, this is all my fault. Don't blame her. I looked at him with a bright smile. Do you like the surprise I prepared for you? Early death or late death? In the end, you die. I prepared this grandly for you. Even the wreaths were ordered by me so you can rest in peace. Acting with you was quite exhausting, but now I understand why you had such a hard time keeping it together. It must have been tough for you, acting with me year after year. Tears flowed uncontrollably like a river breaking its banks. John crouched down in pain, holding his head, and gave me a bitter smile. As long as you're happy, it doesn't matter. I was going to die sooner or later. Seeing you prepare all this with your own hands also makes me happy, doesn't it? I had no words for John anymore. I liked the brave John of before, the one who didn't fear others' opinions. When he started lying to me, taking the first step to deceive me, I no longer loved him. He was truly crazy. I quickly packed my toiletries and clothes and left for another city to clear my mind. Too many things had happened recently. I needed to relax. That night, I saw in the long, quiet neighborhood group chat that John was at my door, pressing the doorbell, saying he would stop when I opened the door. It was midnight, and although the apartment was well soundproofed, the sensor lights would turn on every time the doorbell rang, disturbing the neighbors. Someone in the group recognized him as my boyfriend. They began discussing, saying I was probably working late to earn money for John's treatment, and even strangers knew I was working for him at such hours. Only John didn't know. Only he was in the dark. If he had only paid a little more attention to me, if he had cared a little more, he would have known I loved him more than myself. I could go without food or drink, but he had to have the best. I wrote in the group that he wasn't my boyfriend and asked security to remove the intruder. A kind woman tried to mediate, saying couples always argue and it was normal to have disagreements. But a broken mirror cannot be repaired, and I knew we had no future. John called me, saying he wanted my forgiveness. Forgive him? What for? My sincerity had already been betrayed. Finally, security warned him, and he stopped ringing the doorbell. But he didn't give up, sitting outside my door, saying he would wait until I returned and opened the door. After enjoying myself, I returned home. I didn't know if it was because he hadn't eaten or drunk anything, or if his illness had worsened, but he was extremely thin, just skin and bones. Seeing me, he stumbled towards me. I turned, and he accidentally fell to the ground, bleeding profusely. Stop pretending to be dead. No one feels sorry for you. Don't die at my doorstep. It's unlucky and will lower the property value of the entire neighborhood. If you want to die, do it quietly somewhere else. Don't be an eyesore. I chastised him incessantly. A kind neighbor called an ambulance and had him sent to the hospital. Mrs. Tan's voice came from outside. She was humbly begging me to see John one last time. It was strange. He had told me before that he didn't get along with his family. Yet here was Mrs. Tan, dressed in luxurious clothes, earnestly pleading for me to visit him in the hospital. She even stood up for her son at the wedding. Indeed, old habits die hard. Not a word from John's mouth was true. I know you hate him, but people make mistakes. He's about to die. If you hate him, go and curse him to his face. Vent your anger, okay? What a mother and son pair, even their words were identical. Since he was about to die, there was no harm in seeing him. John had already received a critical condition notice. While I was away clearing my mind, he had stopped his medication against the doctor's advice, causing his condition to worsen rapidly. His body, which could have held on a little longer, was self-destructed by his actions. Serves him right? John clung to my hand, unwilling to let go. You hate me, right? I'm about to die and won't have another chance to hold your hand. Let me hold it a little longer. I owe you an apology. I hurt you and broke your heart. When I die, you can do whatever you want with my body. Scatter my ashes to fertilize flowers or feed fish. I don't care as long as you're happy. He choked out, tears streaming from his eyes. I find it disgusting. I spat through clenched teeth. He paused, still holding my hand. All right. After I die, I'll stay far away from you, letting you be clean and pure. As he finished speaking, the lines on the monitor turned into a straight line, and the medical staff frantically tried to revive him. But it was all in vain. Mrs. Tan, standing aside, made a victory gesture, calling the board to transfer all of John's shares to her name. In that moment, I realized their estranged relationship was real. No wonder they smiled as John lay dying. Mrs. Tan had begged me because they had already made a deal in secret, and I was a crucial part of their transaction. Even though we had broken up, even though I had decided to let go, my heart still ached faintly, and tears rolled down my face like beads from a broken necklace, though my gaze remained as sharp as a knife. I grabbed his blood-stained collar angrily and desperately yelling, "Didn't you say you were sorry? Then get up and apologize to me? Don't you dare fall asleep. If you don't say 1,000, 10,000 sorries, I'll never forgive you. I'll throw you into the sea to feed the fish and dump your ashes in the toilet." But there was no response. The nurse held me back, trying to calm me down and help me accept the reality. From the first day I knew he was sick, I had mentally prepared myself for this. I was afraid, worried that one day I'd wake up and he wouldn't respond. So I underwent desensitization training for myself. I hated him, but my hatred stemmed from love. Because I loved him, I hated him. When he actually died before my eyes, all my pretense crumbled instantly. I cremated his body and bought a plot of land in the suburbs to bury him. In just 3 months, everything had changed dramatically, from mutual affection to bitter enmity. Perhaps we never truly trusted each other. Perhaps our love wasn't strong enough. Or maybe he never really loved me. Mrs. Tan threw all his belongings at my doorstep. In the world of the wealthy, only interests matter. To them, John was a burden. As long as he was around, the company's performance would suffer. No one wanted to follow a sickly person to manage the company. Yet this person was so deeply in love that he was willing to give up his shares just to marry me. But the wedding turned into a funeral, and he got nothing in the end. He was unwilling, but had no choice but to accept this reality. The one he loved no longer loved him. Her heart long shattered and dead. It was all his own doing. His karma. Do I regret it? Perhaps I never regret it. This was the path I chose, and it led to its inevitable end. I loved him passionately, pursued, loved, and hated him. But his love came too late, and I couldn't wait any longer. He didn't have many belongings besides clothes. There were some trinkets and a photo album. All these items were related to me, gifts I had given him on anniversaries or birthdays. Handmade trinkets might not be as refined as branded ones, but each year they were filled with my sincerity. The small photo album was filled with pictures of me, with clear dates, mostly of my back. These were taken by John. Did he love me? Maybe he did. Or maybe he never understood what love was, never knew his own feelings. Things change, and life moves on. I put these items in the storage cabinet and took a bouquet to visit John. I thanked him for accompanying me through difficult times, for even if he didn't love me, he still played along with me. As the sun set, I had to leave. From now on, we would never meet again in this life. Our ties were severed, and I hoped never to see him again in the next life.